Welcome to the Modern Pet Retailer, where local pet retailers come together to solve problems within their pet businesses. We're talking today about how to build training programs. Last week, we discussed how to find the right employees to hire and all the different steps that you need to build in your business to find the right people. And this week, we're going to talk about how to train them, how to get them ready as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible so that they can start producing for your business in an effective way. I think most small businesses outside of our own industry hire someone, bring them in, put them with your best person, and then just let them go and figure it out on their own. Or it's like busy retail time and you just have to get people in the door. And so training can look a lot different. But if you don't build structured training, every person's getting trained differently. Even the same person doing all the training, if they don't have step by step guides, can get very messy because they train one person one day and they're like, "Oh, I said that already." And then they forget to tell the next trainee. There's just a lot of different things if you don't have a laid out checklist for them to cover. So we're going to talk about all the things you want to include in that, the hierarchy of education and how you want to build that within your business. And training systems aren't corporate things. They don't have to be cookie cutter. They could be to your business specific. It's just a protection system for your best employees, your customers, and your time, essentially. Every day you have somebody in training is costing you more money because you're paying them to be there and not produce anything at that point. So want to get them trained as quickly as possible. So I want to start out with how you can structure your training because it's very hard when we're inside our own businesses every day and you're inside this industry every day to know what the base level of knowledge needs to be and what you have to know in order to move up because we know how pet food's made. We have all the inside information because we're here every day doing it. But the new person coming in that has no experience is starting from zero. And it's very hard for us to rewind our own brains and go back to that very base level knowledge.
Yeah, I look at that as a bit of an expert's dilemma. The better we get at something, the less we remember where we began.
Yeah, so with new hires, they can get overwhelmed very easily. I mean, sometimes training can seem like a fire hose. So we want to take the very base knowledge. So what we call here at Braxton is we have a pyramid of hierarchy of education. So we have two different ones. We have one that's Braxton specific. That is going to be everything that's related to Braxton's pet store. And then we also have kind of our nutrition side of our pyramid. And it's going to be literally everything you need to know to sell pet food. Ever different types of brands, how they process, why pet food is made the way it is. But the first layer is very important because if you don't start there, you can't move to the second layer because they're going to be like, wait a minute, why would I add blueberries to pet food if I don't know what the benefit of blueberries are? Got to know something from the base perspective before you can move up. So for the Brax's pyramid or your specific business, you have to know the store's orientation before you can know how to sell pet food because unless you know where it's at, you won't be able to take customers to it. How to basically interact with the customer because every brand is going to be different on how you approach people, what different types of things you do. Some people do upselling in their businesses. Some people prefer not to do that. So knowing those little nuanced things that are specific to your business. Safety, definitely want to hit that first. And then where things are, just if you have shampoos for your self-wash and different types of things that they'll be using on a regular basis, just knowing general knowledge of where those are, like trash bags. So you kind of want to start so basic. It's you feel silly mentioning where those things are. Like this is where the trash is. And then once you get where the store orientation is and all of those other things, you can start moving up to the product knowledge foundations, your POS systems, which are going to be probably your heavy lifting on the education side and common customer questions. Then your next level could be leading into your nutrition panel, your nutrition pyramid, deeper nutrition knowledge, vendor and brand familiarity, handling complex customer scenarios. And then the top is your very specific customer questions, like advanced product recommendations, those pancreatitis dogs, diabetes dogs, stomach ache dogs, sensitivity, those kind of higher end questions, things that you handle on a regular basis, but a new employee is going to have no idea how to answer those. And then your last bit is handling complaints, problem solving skills for different issues that could come up.
Yeah, I really like this structure because you've designed it to be easy to start with, super basic orientation, and then more and more complex as they get comfortable around the store. So it's definitely might take a little bit more time than just throwing them to the wolves, but you're employees know what the expectations are, then they're more likely to stick around for more.
Yeah, and I like to use cross-modal education systems. So people are different types of learners all the time. So we have a visual representation of what these steps look like. So we do a lot of PowerPoints right at the beginning that kind of just articulate our rules and everything. But this is an example of our kind of how we teach people pet nutrition. Because if we lean into the modules that are made by brands that are very educational, they're very biased towards their brand, obviously. So some of them are a little better than others, but we like to get at least the base knowledge introduced from Braxton's perspective specifically, and then start introducing those brands slowly that we believe are less and less biased towards their brand specifically. But you can't start education on nutrition if you don't have a general knowledge of how the pet food industry works. So, what's the differences between the different types of food? What are the different belief patterns in consumers, and then you can get into those minute details of like proteins, fats, and carbs, situational learning. And when I say cross modal learning, I mean like visual learning, situational learning. I like to do associations. Some people don't have dogs or cats when they come in to work for you. And so it's harder for them to retain this information. But knowing how proteins, fats, and carbs work inside their own body is something they have to relate to. They have to know how it works for their own health benefits. So if they can learn it for themselves, it's easier for them to retain it for when it comes to the pet industry and the pet food. And then that top tier kind of situational learning is those very specific questions that we get on a regular basis that are concerns of pet parents that require a very specific answer, or at least a very direct answer. But this is an example of how I like to articulate it. So, one, they know what's coming in the training. They know that we're going to cover these different types of topics. It helps ease the concerns on the first few days of, like, am I going to learn how pet food's made, or whatever the question they may have. They can see here it's going to be covered essentially.
I also think we don't necessarily do it, but if you have essentially allowing the new employee to say that they're in training or they have a different colored shirt or something, it relieves the expectation of many customers that they're going to be slower, they're not going to have all the answers. So something that just allows the new trainee to articulate to the customers that they are new, and making sure that they understand if they don't know the answer, that they should go to their closest resource, your key holder or your trainer, go get that information. They're not going to look dumb if they don't have the answer. They should know exactly where to get the answer.
Yeah. And yeah, any kind of phrase of just like most people are pretty sympathetic, especially since I feel like when people shop here, they're very chill. They're not in a hurry usually. They're like, "I am so sorry. I'm the new I don't know the answer to your question, but I do know somebody that does. Let me go grab them." And we also make it a rule if you get asked those questions to stick around with the employee that's answering it so that you can learn faster of what the answer is to that particular question.
Yeah, it's that type of repetition of being involved in the conversations that helps them to learn to cement the information in their.
So the important thing is a new hire doesn't have to be ready within a week. They just have to be reliable, operate safely, and somewhat useful so that the rest kind of comes with the clear path to get there, basically. So we try to have everybody in ready to transact, interact with customers within 5 days. We feel like that's about as fast as you can go without overwhelming somebody and still make them somewhat productive. And then we do about a 30-day evaluation where they've been following up with some training modules with the brands and some of those modules and some of our other training and see how they're retaining everything. And then we have that final 90-day follow up where we assess, we walk them through our employee evaluation process to let them know which benchmarks they're hitting, what they need to work on, and kind of give them a clear path, or if we needed to at that point part ways, if that's what it needs to be, if they're not happy or satisfied with the situation. So, but all that's laid out on day one. We talk all things of when we're going to be done with training, when we're going to reevaluate so that they know that we're going to keep checking in and not just throw them to the wolves and hope for the best kind of thing.
Yeah, I like the layout first because anytime you can set clear expectations, lack of information causes frustration. Lack of information allows them to think on their own. and create scenarios that may not exist. So setting those expectations right out of the gate is really important, not only just for the training, but the whole employee experience from the beginning.
So after we set up how we want to do our training and our structure, we want to build, of course, the word of the MPRs, SOPs for these kinds of things. Because it has to be written out for the perspective of two different people. It has to be written out for the perspective of the trainee and the person that is being trained, essentially. So we have two identical documents pretty much for everything. We have the trainee facing document that's very basic, gives them the rough checklist of kind of what they're going to be learning. And then we have the trainer checklist, which is a lot more detailed so they know exactly what steps they need to hit. We had a very basic version of some of the higher education things, and we found, and with feedback, found that we had to get very specific and granular on certain types of tasks. So your SOPs are going to look different based on how complicated or difficult the task is that you're trying to train. But an example of one for our specific store that is very detailed and very specific. And again, either one of them can look at this, but this is mainly from the trainer's perspective of making sure that you hit each one of these specific things. Otherwise, they might not be done right. Or the person can use the excuse of, I was never shown that. If they went through this checklist, they have essentially seen that. So, our dog washing and cleaning and maintenance, we found that before we had these kinds of training and SOP, the dog washes looked different depending on who came out after they cleaned them. And we found that the people that were training were using language like, this is how I do this. This is how I clean the hair traps. This is how I do this. And when you use that type of languaging, it's very misrepresentative of, oh, so this is Candace's way of doing it. No, there could be a Tiffany's way of doing it. No, there's only a Braxton's way of doing it. But if you don't have it clearly articulated on how you want that done, it's left up for interpretation. And then you get inconsistent results across the board. So we went from not having anything and having it done 50 ways. And then we went to a very generic checklist where things were still getting missed. So they just weren't articulated well to what we have here, which is our nothing's final, but final draft, which seems to be working pretty well for us. So when somebody trains somebody on this, they're literally stepping through each of these checks to make sure that they turn off the water. It's like things you don't think you need to tell someone. Clearly, you might need to tell somebody. How to clean the drain traps with pictures, trying to make it as specific as possible so there can be no question that the new employee should know how to do this, or they can reference this to make sure that they don't miss a step. This one's kind of a thing that I think used to bug Dave a lot was like our towels and how we fold our towels and what looks consistently clean.
And you referenced the document should be considered dynamic. These things don't get written once and put to bed. They don't get put in a drawer. They're an interactive document. They're intended for trainers and trainees to experience, not just read through. But they also have to be living documents that can change over time. And you notice where they have to be changed when you're training someone brand new. They're going to have the most questions. They are starting from scratch. They don't understand your process. Those questions don't mean you should change the document, but they mean we should be aware the document might have to be changed. The other thing, talking about dynamic documentation, is one thing I would add to this, which I've thought about more recently, is at the very top, you've got your title and a short description, but then I would love to have intent. And intent is just why exactly are we doing it this way? So an intent for dog wash is maybe just two things. Braxton wants to present a professional atmosphere and look for their customers so that they have an environment which they can clean their dog in a clean and functional bath setting. Could be when we clean and maintain the baths on a daily basis, they last longer and they function better. So the intent allows an employee that might either not directly understand the instructions to understand the reason. And in that way, they can get a little bit more out of the document if there's a very specific reason and purpose to the whole point, the instruction. So that's one thing Tiff said. I think of it as a dynamic document. And again, in our example here, I would just add intent to many of the SOPs. If we don't already have it in there, add it later, because I think intent is a good training and instruction.
Yeah, and the picture I had there of the towels is it's something that, again, it's like you don't think about it, but if your core value is to provide the best excellent service that you physically can to your customers and you want that done on a consistent basis, if you don't physically show people what that looks like, again, you'll get 50 different results every time because what somebody considers clean and serviceable might be hogwash compared to what you consider clean and serviceable. So is minute details, like specifics, photos, anything that you see done that you're like, I want this consistently to look better or done better. Just document it basically. So anything that you have reoccurring tasks, you want to create SOPs around that are that specific, detailed, and then you want to create. So we start with a trainer new hire checklist. So all of our new employees start with this checklist. It is very basic. They should have no idea what any of it means other than they know they need to complete these tasks. Because Homebase, that's our payroll software, scheduling software. They shouldn't have any idea what that is. They have no idea what our POS systems thinks, but this gives them an idea. So when they start checking these things off and we start going over them, they know what to do. But the back end one. This is for our trainer's perspective. This is aligns perfectly with the first one you just seen. It just tells them exactly what they need to set up. So we do this in the conference room. We use our laptops and we have the slides. We ask them if they have any questions before we begin. Like all of these very specific things that involve how you properly train people to use our payroll and scheduling system, how to do a tour of the store. There's a reason we do it in this specific way so that it makes geographical sense and it's easier to explain. And then we also have this one specifically set out in its own, similar to the bath one. It's like when you're talking about the dog food section, talk about how we orient it and why we orient it that way, and where the treat section is, and why we separate freeze dried treats from biscuits or something like that. So that when they're stocking and starting to get useful, they have a better idea of why the store is laid out the way it is. Customer interactions, again, this is if they have that background, this is more of bringing them up to speed of what Braxton's customer interactions look like, not if they have any kind of background dealing with customers. It's most likely not the Braxton way. So we want to beat that out of them and then instill our system into their beliefs. Yeah. So all this just gives the trainer a better perspective, and they can say, "Yes, I did watch them and observe them using the crash register. They did it with minimal errors and all these things," so that they can, when they sign them off at the end of the fifth day, they at least know that they touched on all these topics.
A lot of people look at SOPs, like the strictness of our procedure, and think it's highly constrained. And I have different people coming in from different backgrounds. And sometimes there's a little bit of idea that creativity is better than standard. And we had talked about the inventory, that the tighter you make the inventory, the more data driven your decisions around inventory, actually it gives you more freedom, because when you know how things work, then you can be for the employee and customer experience. When you're training a new employee and you have very strict standards, that actually allows them to be more personal and more who they are. Even if you have a standard on how you greet somebody, how you answer the phone, your standard should be somewhere that gives them flexibility to be themselves. You wouldn't necessarily have an absolute strict script to answer the phone, but you should have a standard. You should have a standard greeting, but it doesn't have to be identical every time. You can allow an employee to have some flexibility. But I just wanted to refer to, since you've got a lot of standards that we're explaining with the SOPs and the checklists, that I think some people might go, oh, everybody's different. They have to be trained different. Or if I train them too strictly, then they can't be themselves, can't show their own personality. And I would say the opposite is true. Once you set standard, once you set your training protocols, and that they have a knowledge of your expectations of how they operate and behave within the four walls of your store, they actually can be more relaxed. They can actually be more within their own personality as they grow and learn and meet customers and stuff. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Is I think we're pretty strict about standard, and it shows with the employees that stay and how they engage customers.
Yeah, and your standard can be brand specific. So it's not necessarily, like you said, welcome to Walmart every single time. But if you set the standard of you will greet people in a professional manner so that you don't have the teenager slouching on the counter and saying, "What's up?" You don't want that. That's would be a no-go. Saying, "Hey, welcome to Braxton's," or "Hey, how are you doing today? Is there anything I can help you find?" Those deviations that are still professional, light, welcoming, and clear to our brand. So it's not the same greeting every single time. So I like that example. The other thing that we really like and then about SOPs is the fact that it removes the key man risk of who can train. Because as long as you have a couple of good, solid employees that can read and articulate how all these SOPs, you can trust them to make sure they go through it. I think before when I first got here, we had a girl that had worked here for probably maybe 4 or 5 years. Just she was probably the longer standing, more personable employee that we had, but she was going off of pretty much just her knowledge. She didn't have any checklist of any kind, um, and she liked to use her name, "This is the way I do it," basically. So I was never sure if it was the Braxton way or it was just the most convenient way to that person, so it was kinda left up for interpretation there. Um if she would have had this checklist, she could have walked me through it, and then if that she wasn't there the next day and I needed to do my day 2, somebody else couldn't pick that up because they had no idea what she had covered the day before. She was be relying on what I absorbed, basically, and be like, "Okay, we did this and this yesterday, but I don't really remember all of it." So that you can't just pass it along. You either have to wait for that person to come back so that they can continue, and they're gonna be working off of their own memory. So it's important to have these checklists in place because you just remove that problem. I know when I first started as manager, I preferred to do all the training, and that was more of a control thing on me because I was I wanted it done the Braxton way. I wanted to articulate the Braxton way, and I wanted to be in that immediate feedback loop, which took a lot of time when we were hiring people. But now I can pass it off to 4 different people in here and trust that it's gonna get done, and I don't have to be involved at super high level. Still with the payroll stuff and the sensitive things, like you're involved, but, I can literally hand it to my assistant manager, and she could take it from start to finish and have them completely trained in 5 days without me being too involved, really. So it's nice because if you're the owner doing this, you're getting your time back for that, or if you're the manager, you're getting their time back, better spent.
Yeah, in my mind, we're always pushing information from individual personal knowledge towards institutional knowledge. And that's what these SOPs do. So if you have a star employee and they're the best salesperson, you should institutionalize the knowledge of how they do selling. If you have someone who cleans the baths, they should be the one you should institutionalize that system, that knowledge. It doesn't matter what it is around the place. If it's cleaning the bathrooms, if it's checking in warehouse products, taking taking individual knowledge, and oftentimes that starts with the owner and or manager, people that have been there the longest, and trying to develop a system around their best attributes and creating institutional knowledge from that personal knowledge.
Yeah, and, the institutional knowledge is something that's very hard to overcome if you do come into this late. If you've had a business for a few years and you're just now trying to put these training procedures in progress, if you have any legacy employees that don't have this training, walking them back through it, you're probably gonna see some pushback, and then you'll also get some good feedback of, "Hey, this is what I struggled with when I first started," or "This is what I see new people struggle with the most. You might wanna add this." But getting the legacy people on board so that they know what your brand is, they can align with it, and they understand what the new trainees are learning as they come in. So wherever you're starting, if you're not starting fresh, definitely bring your legacy people on board with the way you're training them.
Yeah, and that creates buy-in from both sides. If you're inviting your senior employees to participate, then obviously they're going to be more engaged in the total process.
So now that we know what different types of processes we want to document, how we want to document, how specific we want to get with the details. I want to talk about knowledge versus behavior training because I feel like knowledge, since we're literally from grade school, we learn however we're going to learn, how we're going to memorize things, how we're going to process things. But I think training behavior is a whole different game because you're gotta overcome however they were raised. You have to overcome whatever job just history they have and what they learned from that job history to training them to what your brand is.
Yeah, and some would say you haven't learned it unless you change your behavior, right? So it's, unless of course they're already there where you want them to be, if you teach them and you get the repetition and they're exposed to what you want, but they don't do anything differently, they haven't actually learned it.
Yeah. So knowledge training, definitely what to do, how products work, what your standards are, and behavioral training is doing the right thing every time, have your trainers being good examples so that they can be emulated when especially when times are like under pressure, you don't want to skip steps. It seems like if we do any kind of training before busy holiday season, some steps try to get missed, or people are like, we got to cut corners just because it's just hectic right now. I'll be like, no, we got to take our time and do this the right way. Or we're doing things when ownership or management's not watching. That's like a cultural thing, but we have to train that you do the right thing even when no one's watching so that you don't just don't have employees that require you to be on the floor to be doing the right thing.
There's the other side of that is the actual owner doing something differently than the trainer, which is also not good. The management and owners should abide by the systems that you've developed. And as Tiff said, lead by example. And if you think it's just for the employees, it's not for me, they're watching and they'll
Mhm.
notice that.
Yeah. So when we talk about different learning styles for people, I feel like usually the most different we get when we let's talk about how I here we go. There's a difference between watching and then doing with support and then doing it alone. So we want to help guide people through that no matter how they learn in their way. So we have a clear three-step process at Braxton's, and I will use our POS system as an example because it seems to be the most hands-on learning that you need to do. Phase one, we have people shadow for the POS system. So we're watching transactions. Usually it takes 10 to 15 transactions before somebody can maybe jump in and do a little bit on their own. So we require people to watch a certain amount of transactions, kind of get a good feel, and that's going to change for everybody. One employee might be more tech literate and understand maybe some different platforms and see how our system works and get it quicker. And then some might need a little bit more. So it's up to our trainers to feel people out, ask good feedback questions of does this make sense while they're in the shadow process before they just give them support. And then the next phase is support reps. So that's going to be somebody literally on your shoulder, the new trainees doing the transaction and being guided through that. And this is anywhere from 20 to 50 reps that need to be done with somebody, because I'm sure a lot of people know that when you have inventory errors, most of the time it's at the point of retail transaction. And you don't want to have a new hire just scanning things, scanning the wrong things, double scanning anything, and just sending product out the door or double charging your customers and then getting that uncomfortable phone call later. So we require a certain amount of transactions to be done with an employee pretty much on your shoulder, guiding you through the whole process. Sometimes people bring in odd coupons that they might not be waiting for or expecting or seen before. Different types of questions that could pop up, just guiding them through the process in general. So after they get that, then they get their solo reps. These solo reps are still closely watched, but a little bit farther back. But we want them to have, by the end of the 5 days, at least 100 reps on their own before I would consider somebody at least somewhat proficient to be able to do a standard transaction. So that the solo reps need to be done independently, minimal assistance. Um, and again, some employees do this a lot quicker, and some people need more than 100 reps, which is totally fine. We here, and I'm sure other people in the pet retail have the very specific POS system. So even if they worked at a coffee shop before, POS system might not look the same or even close as to what they had at a different retail setting. So being patient, working through those phases and you setting the tone of like, how long does it take? If you have somebody that's doing 1,000 reps and they still don't seem to have the POS system at least somewhat proficient, that might be a red flag for you to address, talk about in your feedback.
I think too is as the trainer is stepping back to give the new person the resources. Just if you don't understand something, you can call on the next closest person that's been there. So I would train the 80 to 90% of transactions. So that's your typical purchases. That's your multi-unit purchases like cat and dog cans, maybe consumables, and then a few reps on returns, or as Tiff said, special coupons. If you're coupon heavy store, that's going to accommodate 90% of your transaction types, but there still might be some things that they will not be exposed to. And it will be more difficult to train because they just don't have that often. Make them aware that there will be edge cases that they won't be familiar with and that they should not just attempt it, especially if it's complicated. They should attack a resource, an experienced employee, the trainer, the manager. Not that they need management approval to do it, but because they've not done that type of a transaction before, they should call someone to get it so that it's done correctly. But it doesn't and operate independently on the point of sale because you've trained them on the 90+% type of transactions that your whole store experiences.
Yeah. I think an important thing is just throwing someone in too early will create bad habits that are just way harder to fix. I always find that our systems get broken when that happens, and it's harder for me to figure out what they even did to get to that result. So I try not to throw in people too early. And then you also have to make sure that you don't hold them back for too long because it's just killing their confidence in their progression. So it's definitely a balancing game. I want to circle back to using staff to help you build these programs because they're going to be your best asset. They're the ones doing it every day. You're too close to the knowledge. So using your retail staff to help you build these programs. I think we started off with a questionnaire for employees that had been here longer than me of what was hard for you to learn, what's still difficult for you to do every day, what makes your life harder. When you have a new employee, what frustrates you the most immediately of what they don't get, why you think they might not be getting it. Just building some kind of feedback loop and some kind of questionnaire process to get where you need to focus first. One, this might reveal what it reveals what you want to train, and then it also reveals what you might want to fix anyways within your business, because there might be systems that are just broken that you just don't know about that have been frustrating your staff that might not be enough to frustrate them and let you know about it. Or they might just think this is the way it's been, this is the way it is, this is just how we do things. But unless you get that feedback and know you can't change anything, so bringing them in, bringing your longstanding employees in that know literally the ins and outs. They can help you with that, what the base knowledge needs to be so that you know how to build off of that.
Yeah. And I would say too is if you don't invite them in, they're probably already doing things without your knowledge, right? If they're experiencing something frustrating on a daily basis, ultimately they're probably not doing things the way that you expect. So this is going to highlight where the training has to change based on their on the ground experience. And I know for myself, if I'm not in the mix on a regular basis, I tend to ignore it. So trying to get yourself into the mix in receiving and front staff and the cleaning even helps you to understand better what your employees are going through and what your new hires need to be taught.
Yeah, and you don't want to just create that feedback loop and that perspective from the current employees. You also want them for the brand new employees too. So we do a soft conversation at the end of the 5 days. How do you feel? Is there anything you're like, I really need help with this immediately because I'm not comfortable with it? And then at that 30-day mark, when we check back in with them, if they haven't mentioned anything before, we have a questionnaire that says, what do you still feel you need proficiency in? Like, where what areas of the business do you feel like you don't know enough about, and helps reinforce, hey, did we fully cover that? Is this particular person just struggling with it because the situation hasn't popped up? Can we create training that would make faux situations to help train that process faster? So just use both avenues to kind of build this training program out. I think with another thing, if you have 3 new hires that in a row that struggle with the same exact thing, it's probably a problem in the training or the process. So you want to make sure that if you're getting the same exact feedback from different trainees or employees that are giving you feedback on the trainees, that you fix that problem immediately because something's not connecting, it's not training, it's not working within the system of your store.
Yeah, I think this touches back to these are dynamic documents. And also a lot of what you addressed here, Tiff, is if you don't have a lot of SOPs in your business, it can be overwhelming. Like, why do I have to document everything? And you make a really good point is you don't document it all yourself. First of all, you're running your part of the business and you might not be involved in all of the part of the business as much as some of the employees. So using experienced employees to help develop these SOPs and the feedback from new trainees is absolutely critical. One, it's going to be closer to the job, and two, it's going to be way faster and easier. I would just suggest setting a template, and that can be your job is what does a good SOP look like? And then handing that off to your well-trained employees to explain the job. And again, the feedback from the newest trainees, where you're missing instructional, where you're not quite getting it, or where they're struggling, and then focus on those areas. So it might seem overwhelming in the beginning to think about creating hundreds of documents around everything you do in the store, but really the way you develop it is allowing your employees to develop it.
That's just building their communication skills. If most of our retail staff are entry level employees, if they can figure out how to write and document and articulate how to do a task, that's just building their skill and they can take that on to the next thing too. So that's just great education installments in your staff and skill building. The last thing I want to talk about is something that probably within the last year has come up in our business that I didn't think about personally. I thought everybody kind of knew how to train people, but we had probably about a year or two ago, our three top employees that we call either our team leads or assistant managers come to us and they're like, we are training these people and we're following the checklists. And I feel like they're not getting it still. And we took a step back and they were like, I don't really know the best way to explain this or how to navigate when they have maybe a learning disability of some kind or anything like that, or just the different learning styles. If you're an auditory learner, a visual learner, or anything like that. There were so many different things that they just didn't know how to handle if you weren't just a clear, straight shot learner or you didn't learn however they specifically learned. So that was something that I didn't think about building until they brought it to my attention. So basically, we invested in a training program. It was called Train the Trainer. And we all took that as a course together to figure out what different things you need to learn in order to train other people, different types of learning styles and all that. And not everyone that is good at their job might be a good trainer. And that's also something I didn't necessarily consider. You can have your star employee that's just really good at engaging customers, and it just could be not a personality thing for them. They might not want to do it so that they're just not giving their full effort that they give to a customer. They might not be giving a full effort to the training process. So you want to find the people that are hungry to teach new people, hungry to make your business better, and that are also very knowledgeable within your business and can follow clear instructions. But finding people that are also patient, consistent, and having the ability to explain things in multiple ways. Patience is huge because some of our trainers were just like, I told them how to do it. And they'd be like, how many times did you tell them how to do it? Once. And like, this person needs it three times. This person needs it three different ways. Person needs to be shown how to do it. So when we took that class, it was eye opening. I didn't realize all these different ways. And I probably train people the same way. This is how I learn it. So you need to know if we're doing this task, you need to know why, because I'm a very much a why person. I need to know why I'm doing it. Otherwise, I it doesn't commit to memory very well.
I think when you look at this section here, Tiff, training people to train and the investments that we've made, worth it. And don't go short on this. If you have to sit a trainer in a room with yourself or the training program that you buy, worth it. You're paying them their hourly rate. You've paid for training. Maybe you have to sit with them. So it's your hourly rate. This is an investment that will pay off because it does two things. One, more consistency, better training. And two, ultimately, you're no longer the single point of training. If someone walks in and the owner or manager has to walk the employee through every step, That's a massive, we talked about the cost of that previously. It's like, what's your expected hourly rate as an owner or manager? If you can help someone else be a good trainer, that's a massive cost saving feature. So consider this an investment. It's an investment possibly in money through training programs. It's an investment in time. Take the time to build the systems and to do the training. It will pay off. So worth it.
Yeah, and the thing I liked about that course that we did do is we have some job titles with under me basically, so team lead and assistant manager. But let's say we're growing these young employees and we want them to go off and work on to their next role if they stay in retail to move up. But if we didn't give them the proper training, their resume reads team lead or assistant manager, but do they have the skills to perform that at the next level without struggling at their next role? So, like all of this, just a bit, you're investing in your employees. And like you said, you're getting better outputs out of your own business. So, it's kind of makes you a better place to work when you invest in your employees and you build good training systems that they can learn from and they don't feel overwhelmed. Because my hope is if we have an employee that doesn't want to work here because after the training, it just wasn't for them, they say nice, positive things about, oh, they really tried to educate me on the pet and I just didn't want to learn it or whatever the case is. I want them to say positive things instead of going on Glassdoor and typing up very mean comments. But like, there's no training program. They just fed me to the wolves, and it was sink or swim, and I chose to leave. So
I think that's a good point is we don't necessarily have to sell it to our employees, but articulating the idea is this is a benefit to them beyond your four walls. What's the quote? What if I spend the time and money training people and they leave? The counter to that is, what if you don't train your people and they stay? Right? We want to
amen.
make sure, especially because we have a lot of young people, exactly to Tiff's point, is we will be better off and they will be better off if we take every opportunity to make them a better person, make them train them in retail ways and understanding ordering and front staff care, and all of the things that we want to train them in. It's okay if they leave, they're going to be better off, but we have a better system and we can take the next person and we can bring them up to speed quickly. So we're never afraid of people leaving us and leaving us after we've spent time to train them because our system helps to train them more quickly, more easily. We have a better system, become a better store. We also know they're not going to stay with us forever. And the alternative is worse. What if we don't train them and they do stay? That's more dangerous. The sweet spot, of course, is someone who is growth oriented, someone who is an intelligent individual. If you do not train them and they want more, they will leave. They'll go to another place that does the training, that does the teaching. And that's the worst case scenario is you lose people that would have been wonderful employees because you didn't take the time to let them know what your expectations are, to build systems that they can learn from, and to spend time engaging in their intelligence to bring them up to not only your way of doing business, but obviously just good processes all the way around. My high level is the importance of SOPs. And even though it's a daunting task, you don't have to do it yourself. But I just can't say enough about these are dynamic documents. We're building a system that is integral to the operation of business. And we don't really have a business if it's just dependent on the owner or the owner and the manager. It's very difficult to replace yourselves unless you build a system around it. I think you mentioned it before, but the book E-Myth, we just gave that to someone. It's a very simple read, but it's probably my most gifted book for people who are thinking operate a business or thinking about operating a business. Is it's systems orientation, but it's a very easy read. So E-Myth by Michael Gerber, worth the time to read it.
Agreed, for sure. So if we put this all together, we're going to lay out a pyramid of base knowledge, what they need to know to work themselves up and educate themselves on your store. And then we need to create SOPs around that knowledge base. Any recurring tasks that a new hire might be responsible for. Then we're going to do a shadow progression on some of the more repeatable tasks. If you're training somebody for the warehouse reps, training somebody for the cash register, it can be as specific as stocking the shelves correctly. If you don't train somebody how you want your shelf stock, they will look 50 different ways at the end of the day. Current employees, getting a feedback loop from them and understanding what they struggle with and what their perspective of new employees struggle with. The feedback loop from the new trainees side will help progress the training faster. And then finally, training our trainers on how to properly talk to people, how to articulate our SOPs in our brand. And like Dave said, a training program is not a document to build once and just forget about it. It's a living system. It gets better every time you have a new person come through it. The stores that retain well, which is just going to save you money at the end of the day. And retention is one of the most profitable investments you can make inside your business. Thank you again, Dave, for joining. All right. So next week, we're going to talk about how to retain and build your team and build it around the culture you want so that you don't have to have too many uncomfortable conversations. Talk about educating them and building them up so that they, like Dave said, don't go to other places to find that. Because like he said, good employees will leave to find those good things. So we want to be that for them. We'll see you then.